Hey guys, and welcome back to Tennis 360, the podcast where we talk about all things tennis. My name's Anthony Hirsch.
And I'm Eliza Wastcoat.
Welcome back to the podcast. This is the seventh podcast we're doing. And how are you? First of all, how are you doing, Eliza?
Good, thank you. So much better than last week. Sorry to have missed it.
Yeah, no, you're good. Yeah, you missed out last week, but we're back at it, which is good. Yeah, we're both here. We're going to talk about two 1,000 tournaments. We're going to talk about Beijing. We're going to talk about Shanghai, and there's a lot of other things going on around the tennis world. So let's get into it. Iga Swiatek gets within just 400 points of Sabalenka at the top spot, gets in the 1,000 tournament of this year, her first 1,000 tournament of the year, which is she won a few last year. This was her first this year, beat Samsonova in the final with a great performance, 6-2, 6-2 in that final as well. What do you think of the final? You can get into that.
Yeah, pretty clinical performance. I think she played a really good week. Testament to some of the work that she's been doing over the last couple of months, honestly, since the French Open. Seems like she's been putting some work in on the volleys, a couple of adjustments on her serve as well. And seems like there's been a little bit of a pressure lift off her shoulders going to the number 2 spot rather than being at the number 1. I think having listened to Iga speak in her press conferences, she really carried the burden of being world number 1, and that seemed to the constant need to have to outperform Sabalenka to maintain that spot, I think, was a pressure that was just becoming a little bit too much for her to handle. And she sort of admitted that she wasn't having too much fun. So I think just seeing her play these last 2 tournaments, it felt like she was playing with a little bit more freedom, and she looked a little bit happier on court. So happy, in fact, that she cried after she won that match point. So, clearly means a lot to her, clearly felt a bit of pressure and stress of this season compared to last season and kind of what people have thought her performance has been, if it's deteriorated or not. But I don't know about you. In my opinion, I think the competition and level of competition has really stepped up in 2023. So it hasn't, to me at least, been so much of Iga having a bad season. I think she's had a great season. I just think the Sabalenkas, Rybakinas, and other folks in and around that top 10, Coco Gauff as well, have stepped up their level since last year. And, you have to adjust, and she's doing that. So impressive win, and happy for her to get that title.
Yeah. Totally. She was the top dog for the longest time. She was the player that everybody wanted to beat. She had one of the longest stints ever, one of the longest first stints ever at a number 1 ranking. And I think that now, like you said, the pressure has really come off of her. And I think that the level of the tour has really stepped up. I mean, we saw it at the start of the year with the Australian Open final being Rybakina Sabalenka, Rybakina beating her in straight sets, and kind of the power players really her having to adjust herself. So I think this was a big moment for her. I guess for her confidence, I think more than anything, the fact that she can go all the way and win a 1,000 tournament with players like Rybakina, with Sabalenka. Still in the mix, absolutely. And it was, I think that is a big thing for her, that it was kind of a mental win. And she was really solid this week. I mean, in that first set against Samsonova, she hit no unforced errors, just super solid. Samsonova was just playing aggressive and being super solid, but being super aggressive, but Swiatek was just hanging back, being super solid, doing what she needed to do. And yeah, it's all the better for Swiatek. She gets within 400 points of Sabalenka with just the WTA finals to play, but that's going to be an interesting race at the end of the year.
Yeah, I think so. And wanted to throw in a couple numbers, testament to how good a season she has had, contrary to what some of the rhetoric has been like online. She's got an 85% win rate in 2023. That's an impressive number. She's got 63 wins so far, 5 titles total in 2023, one of those being a Grand Slam. And yes, it's not as many as 2022, but she's the first player to win 5 or more titles in back-to-back seasons since Serena Williams did it in 2015, 2016. And that's a feat not to be underestimated, especially when we think about the variety and different names that have been in contention for titles over the last 5, 6, 7 years in the women's game. Some of them leaving, some of them young and up and coming. And for her to put together 2 really dominant back-to-back seasons at her age and experience level, I think, is testament to how good of a player she is, and also shows that there's room for improvement for her. And, we can expect that to be a continuing battle for the number 1 spot. And she's going to be a name that's inside that top 5, looking to take the number 1 spot back off of Sabalenka. And so it'll be interesting, as you said, to see how the year finishes off between them two, and how that will position them for the first Grand Slam of the season next year, with obviously Sabalenka defending her title in Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the big thing that was exciting to me about this year and how it's really panned out is it makes the scope of the future of the sport really exciting, with 3 young players, Swiatek, Sabalenka, and Rybakina, all super young, and Goff stepping up in the North American swing, winning Washington, then winning in where was it, Cincinnati, then New York. It's been really good. 16-match win streak up until the semifinals. I saw some people talking about Goff making semis as that being a bad thing, but listen, it's a bad matchup for Goff against Swiatek. I mean, you can beat a player once, that shows that she's gonna be that's going to be a rivalry to watch in the future, but that doesn't mean that that's necessarily going to be easy for Coco from here on out. Just like I don't know. It's just, you see it time and time again with different rivalries. Just because you can beat them once doesn't mean you can beat them again and again, but still a great run for Coco to get to the semis. And I think I think the scope of the future of the sport is really interesting.
Things look great. And I think Coco admitted she might have picked up a little bit of a shoulder niggle that's causing her some pain. She talked about having not kind of had to play with pain before. And as you said, the season has been packed for her in terms of the last couple months. She's made the final of all of these events, or run deep. And so, things start to add up. A 16-match win streak at the end of the season is fantastic. She's going to want to go home, get some rest now, and see what she can do at the finals. But yeah, as you say, all 4 of those names are really great prospects. And then we have other up-and-comers inside that top 10 that are moving around too. Jabeur made a Wimbledon final. Then we have Vondrousova, who won Wimbledon. Can she be consistent next year? We had the likes of Mukova making the French Open final and really being a challenger. And then you have folks who are knocking on the door, and Sakkari, who could potentially step up if she turns a corner on the mental front. And then, some other champions that are just outside the top 10, and Kvitova, Ostapenko, who's knocking on the door again to get inside the top 10. So a lot of names who have titles, who have Grand Slam titles, who are, looking to add to that haul. And for me, of those names on that list, Swiatek is going to be one that is going to continue to win slams and do so consistently. And she's proven she can do that. And I think she really has the skill set to do that across multiple surfaces. Whereas I would have more question marks as to how many titles and how consistently a Sabalenka might have over the rest of her career. I expect her to win another slam, but if you ask me to choose one over the other, it would probably be Swiatek from a consistency perspective.
Yeah. And I think, firstly, to add to your point, I think it's been a really complete season for the top of the women's game. I think all of the Grand Slam finalists have been all kind of different players, which is except for Sabalenka making 2 at the start of the year and the end of the year. But I think that really makes it a great thing for the women's sport, that it shows that at the top of the game you have really great players and really great rivalries at the top of the game, and it shows. But the depth is there too. I would even add in Madsen Keys, Samsonova, who just reached the final here. There's so many players to name. Also, players coming up like Mira Andreeva, Brenda Fruhvirtova just around the corner. I mean, and just so many different players. So I think that makes it really, really exciting. And and to add to your point as well, I think that Swiatek versus Sabalenka. I think it's really hard to judge just from this year. From Swiatek, we saw her winning Roland Garros in 2020, but I think that is so it shows that over a 3-year span she can still perform very well. Mm-hmm. I think that it's going to be interesting to see next year, the year after this, now that Sabalenka's really up to tier in the rankings, but also just in her game where she can win these win these big titles, won a major, and where she's double faulting less, her not going so down on errors. She's added a little bit more variety to her game as well, which has really helped her out as well. And also Rybakina stepping up. It's going to be interesting over the next few years, next couple of years, how they do. Also, Swiatek is very good across clay courts and hard courts. I'm not so sure that Sabalenka or Rybakina are as good on clay courts and hard courts or across either of the two surfaces. Even if they are as good on grass courts, I'm not sure that that's going to pay for the rankings in that big of a way. So I think that that's it's going to be interesting to watch. I'd be very curious to see how many majors Rybakina and Sabalenka end up with. Swiatek as well. Some people are saying she's going to win 10 over 15 majors. Some people say less. It's kind of like Alcaraz on the men's side too. It's like, it's so hard to know because it could be a very small amount, could be a lot. It depends on Swiatek is improving on grass now, got to the quarterfinals of Wimbledon. So her major count, like Alcaraz on the men's side, it depends on how she keeps improving across the surfaces. If she can win a lot more hard court majors at this point, I believe she just has that one U.S. Open last year, but it will be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see how it all pans out. For me personally, I kind of tend to agree with you. I don't think that Sabalenka is going to get up there in majors in the same way that Swiatek is going to. If she's going to win 20 majors plus that, I don't know about that either. If she's going to get to Serena numbers, but I think it's going to be interesting to see how it pans out.
I agree. And one thing is a given with those two is that they're continually improving. I think that's what impresses me about them so much is, you see the improvement in Sabalenka's game. I watched one of her interviews the other day. She's like, yeah, I'm realizing I don't need to always pummel the ball. Like I can use angles. I can add variety. And so I think, Sabalenka shows that she can make big turnarounds and big overhauls in her identity as a player on the court. And so if she, can continue that trajectory, then perhaps I would be more confident in those numbers being a little bit higher. But the way that Sabalenka, has played this year has obviously been really consistent, but it's been very two-dimensional in terms of her strategy for winning matches. And so, at some point that gets figured out and, not everybody can deal with her pace, but the folks who can will cause her problems. So she'll want to have a think in the off season in terms of what other weapons she might want to work on so that she comes into the US Open with a little bit of a more of a plan B or a backup plan for situations like she was in that US Open final where Goff kind of figured it out in terms of dealing with that pace and power. But as you said, I think both of those names are going to be slam winners. If they get up to the same numbers as Serena, that's a challenging feat that I don't think, we need to add that pressure to the mix, but certainly names that I would expect to see winning more slams over the next few years.
Yeah, I think we've definitely gotten spoiled to numbers like Serena's 23 or to Rogers 20, Nadal's 22. Like on the men's side, it's like Djokovic 24. You get spoiled to these different kind of numbers, and I think that even if Swiatek wins 10 majors, then that will already put her as an all-time great women's player. It's just that. I mean, Venus won 7. And she's considered an all-time great player. So I think that that's something that we've kind of gotten spoiled to as tennis fans. I think we should collectively dial back our expectations because not everybody's getting to 20 plus. So we'll see what Swiatek does. I think her improvements on hard courts and being able to have her game line up with the big games of Rybakina, of Sabalenka, but also being able to weave off players like Coco Gauff, like Mira Andreeva, like other players coming up. I think that'll be a big thing for her, and it's going to be interesting how it all kind of pans out. And then if you want to talk about as well, we Sabalenka versus Rybakina as well happened, a rematch of the Australian Open, and that was an interesting match that happened, and it was Rybakina who actually got the win here over Sabalenka and reached the semifinals. Rybakina, not a lot of people have been talking about her. She's been having some health concerns and other things like that. Not playing to her best, but I think a lot of people forgot just how crazy she was playing earlier in the season, having such a top-tier game that she even won Rome. On clay, which was never her best surface, and the way she just plays at her best when just constantly on the baseline and on backhand and forehand hitting just amazing kind of just beautiful shots, hitting over the shots was really amazing to watch from Yelena, and I think that it's really good to see her back at the top of her game, because I really think that at her peak, she has one of the highest peaks in the game, if not challenging the highest peak. Her peak is really high, and she only reached the semis. She lost to Samsonova, who is also playing a good aggressive game in this tournament, but it was good to see Rybakina back at her best for me.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, she had such a dominant start to the season, looked really confident, has such a clean game. I mean, technique-wise, her serve is beautiful. She's leads that ace leaderboard by a large margin. She's so clean off of the baseline. She's willing to come in, and she just has such a level-headed approach about her tennis. And it's been such a shame, you know, she was firing so hard from Indian Wells up until Rome, you know, got a couple of those titles under her belt, and was looking like she could be a threat at the French Open. And then, yeah, fell ill. And since then hasn't been able to really put a big, you know, mount a big challenge in any tournament, to be honest. Dealing with injury as well with her shoulder, physical illness. And you can see that some of that has just impacted, you know, kind of that match fitness, mental readiness, which to me is why, you know, a semifinal kind of loss can come at this stage for her to Samsonova, who's a lower ranked player, but nonetheless is still a very strong opponent. You would just, you know, had this match taken place in February of this year, I would have been pretty confident in saying that Rybakina would come out with the win there. So I think, again, she's another one of those players that's going to want to, you know, get this WTA finals over with and then really get some good rest and good recuperation time and try to kind of put this second half of the season to one side, chalk it up to, you know, life happens, things happen. It's nothing to do with her game per se or how she's been playing, but more so her health. So if she can regain that confidence of, hey, when I'm healthy, I can really be amongst the best. And as you say, have one of the highest peaks in the game. So I think for her, it's just going to be really important that she gets the rest she needs over the next couple months. So when the new year rolls around, she can hit the ground running.
Yeah, that's a good point, because yeah, some of her best tournaments at least came earlier in the year. Yeah, right around when she was getting to the final of Indian Wells in Miami was a part of the season where I was like, wow, she's really kind of picking up and could challenge for the number one spot. And I was like, because even before that, earlier in the year, she was playing a really good level, but she reached, in my opinion, the best tennis that she was playing this year at those tournaments. And I thought that her I don't know, consistency to reach both those finals was really great. Nobody had won the Sunshine Double on the women's side since Azarenka. She was one match away from doing it, but that was really good for me. So yeah, a good regroup before that happens. The next year would be good as well. Obviously, defend the Australian Open final as well. And then, I mean, listen, she's got points to gain at Wimbledon as well. She reached the quarterfinals. I think she can definitely do better there, like she did last year where she took the title. So for regroup for next year, and then also to prepare for the grass swing, because I'll be disappointed if she doesn't do better than the quarters, because she's got the perfect game for the grass. And then yeah, we can look at some of go ahead.
No, totally agree.
Yeah.
She's definitely on the grass for sure.
Yeah, and then let's see what else we can talk about real quick with the Beijing, and then we can move on to the end of the Beijing tournament on the men's side, and then of course talk about Shanghai, which is going on as well. So what else is there to talk about? Yeah, Samsonova, she played a good tournament, but again lost in the final. But listen, since about the second half last year, she's been playing a really good game, really aggressive. Maybe not consistently being able to beat or really test out the top players to their best, but I mean, she was coming in a lot during the whole tournament. Really good display at the net, and I was quite pleased with her getting to the final of an 1,000. I felt like it's deserved. And it was good to see just a few too many unforced errors from her. Like I said, Swiatek barely hitting errors in that match. I think it was a double fault to give away a break in the first set. And then it was a drop shot error off an easy shot from Swiatek to give away the second break in the second set, and then also simultaneously the match as well. But I think that is a player that I think is very very promising going into next year. And I think honestly the women's side is crazy at the moment. I think I would think a lot of people would agree with me. I think and going into 2024, that's very exciting. And then also Garcia and Sakkari having good ends to the season. They'll be playing a tournament this week as well. I forget which tournament that is, but they will be playing in Zhangzhou in China, which is should be interesting. Sakkari and Garcia having good runs up until for the last few weeks. Both of them not having a great start to the season, but having a few good runs now, which is really cool. And Garcia nearly had a great match against Iga, who took home the whole tournament, 7-6, 6-7, 6-1 for Iga. But Garcia tends to be a good matchup against Iga, like a lot of aggressive players do. But anyway, that was good to see. And then Ostapenko, another you could call aggressive style player, kind of all out, with a solid win over Pegula. And I'm excited. I don't know. I think Yelena has her best season since 2017. I think she's going to get on a good run at some point and really step up. But then, and then if you're good, we can move on to the Beijing on the men's side to talk about what happened there.
I think that, as you said, the women's lineup is super stacked right now. I wouldn't be surprised if by this time next year we're looking at new names in the top 10 or old names returning to the top 10, an Ostapenko, a Kvitova, potentially. Garcia and Sakkari will have been disappointed with their Grand Slam performances this year, and understandably so. But, it's important to finish the year strong no matter what happens. And they made a good go of trying to make qualification. But things, unlike on the men's side, are now wrapped up for the WTA finals qualification. So just as a reminder for folks, before this week, it was already Sabalenka, Swiatek, Goff, and Rybakina and Pegula qualified. And then there was just some last names wrapped up this week. So rounding it off is going to be Vondrousova, Mukova, and Jabeur. So Sakkari just about misses out there, but in the live rankings, she's pushed up inside the top 10 again. So should be a really exciting WTA finals, and really strong end to the year for a lot of these players. So great to see so many names in the mix, and so much competition available for the start of next year as well.
Yeah, and there's so many names at the end of that tournament, which were also in the running of potentially making WTA finals, but they had to win the whole tournament. But potentially Ostapenko as well. If she won the whole tournament, she would have had a chance to get to the WTA finals. So that was really fun at the end of that tournament. Okay, and then we can talk about Beijing.
Yeah.
Jannik Sinner gets the win against Daniil Medvedev. It is a really exciting end to the tournament. Sinner gets a win over Medvedev in the final. That's his first win in 7 meetings. 5 of those came on indoor hard courts, which I felt like was always going to be tough for Sinner. Sinner was, I think, felt a bit sick in the Miami final. Daniil Medvedev was playing crazy at the time, but Sinner was feeling a bit sick. But he's feeling fully healthy. He was in great form going in, had a comfortable win over Alcaraz, hitting that forehand absolutely massive. Against Alcaraz in the semifinals, he came into net 15 times, won all 15 points, playing super aggressive. And just, I don't know, physically he looks better than ever, although thinking about that, it sounds a little bit ironic because he was actually feeling unwell earlier in the tournament against Dimitrov. He was actually throwing up in a trash can, which is not what you really want to see, but he fought through it and believed that he could still go all the way. And to one day later beat Alcaraz is crazy. So beating the world number 2 and world number 3, first of all, crazy for Sinner. Number 2, when do you even play the world number 2 and world number 3 in an ATP 500 tournament, and a world number 2 and world number 3 that both have over 60 wins on the season? So shout out to Sinner. He played crazy to even do that. And Sinner gets a winning head-to-head against Alcaraz, which is really crazy. Those two always bring out great tennis from each other. Alcaraz always really pushes Sinner to his creative best, gets a lot of variety out of Sinner, really makes Sinner step forward, because that does a lot against Alcaraz. And Sinner stepping forward really pushes Alcaraz to have to play his best tennis, because he can struggle against the more aggressive players, as we've seen time and time again. But Jannik Sinner getting the win and gets to the top 5 for the first time. For the first time, passes Tsitsipas in the rankings, and also just gets to world number 4 in the world. He's been the fourth best player this year, clearly. If you're taking in the whole scope of the year, some people might have said Zverev, Rublev until last week, but Sinner clearly the fourth best, or at the moment, Sinner, Rublev, but Sinner is the best if you're counting in the whole year. It's not even close, really. And it was really exciting to see Sinner go all the way, playing super aggressively as always, and just winners all over the court, and to beat the best of the best to do it.
Yeah, it was a really impressive run and such a stacked entry list for a 500 tournament. I mean,
Yeah.
Such a short tournament and having to play all of those big names back to back to back days. I mean, I think he said he started the tournament kind of recovering from a cold. Then in that Dimitrov match, as he said, he was throwing up. Then he's playing Alcaraz the next day, and then Medvedev the next day, who he's lost to 6 times in a row. Medvedev on hard courts this year. I mean, he's the one to beat. And so such an impressive run by him. And I think, again, he's another one of those names that impresses me so much because of his kind of patience and just like commitment to the process. You know, I think some people might have been like, why hasn't Sinner won a slam? Or why hasn't Sinner this, and that? And it's like Sinner's game from even like from the start of the year to now has made significant changes and improvements. If you just want to look at the serve, he's gone from a platform serve to a pinpoint serve. And I think he's gotten now to a point in his serve where it's like, that's the one, that's the variation that's working for you the best. And so to me, it's just so impressive that he's been able to be patient enough with himself and be like, look, like there have been moments over the last 18 months, 2 years, where I've had to take a step back to take 2-3 steps forward. And I think that will serve him so well in terms of the longevity of his career to address some of the challenges and kind of issues he had in his game now as a young player, rather than just kind of being like, you know, stubborn and just committing to what he knows and does, and thinking that will get him to the most elite level he could possibly be at. So I think that's why I've been so impressed by the trajectory of Sinner's year, and would agree that he's definitely been the fourth best player. And it looks like he's just continuing to add to that skill set and his weapons, and is continuing to learn and develop as a player. And that should really be something that other players have an eye on and a concern about, because it's just like, you know, look at the changes he's made already, and he will continue to do so. He has that mindset. He has the right team. He has a great coach. And so I would expect to see him next year really making the most of this number 4 ranking and really going on a positive trajectory from here. So well deserved to win the title this week, and to go from Beijing to Shanghai, which also has a stacked entry list, and make it now to the round of 16, you know, in back-to-back tournaments like this. That's also super impressive. A lot of players are feeling really tired at this time of the year. I probably are like, oh, I've already qualified for, you know, ATP finals, kind of want to take my foot off the gas and maybe relax a little bit. But he's still grinding it out. And I think, again, testament to his mental strength and the physical improvements he's been making this year as well.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's really exciting time for Sinner. And I think that I really agree with everything that you said about the fact that he's constantly improving. I think the importance of the 2022 season really comes into effect with what this season has panned out to look like. I mean, I'll be honest, I actually predicted before the year started. I have it saved online so people can check the receipts, as some may say. But I think that Sinner. I said I think Sinner is going to crack the top 5, certainly the top 10. I said at this year I predict Sinner is going to crack the top 5, because I felt like even during 2022 he was playing the level that I think some of the top players might. He can beat some of the top guys. He got a match point from Alcaraz. Famously went up 2 sets to love on Djokovic at Wimbledon. So I think he was right up there, and he actually had a good win percentage for the season 2022, over 70%. But I think this year it's up to almost 80% win percentage, which is elite level. And it's like it's really impressive stuff that he's just constantly. Everybody has their own kind of journey. He's constantly improving. He's aware of the fact that he's not even where he wants to be right now. He's like, listen, you think I'm good now? I have ways to grow. I have ways to grow physically. Listen, I beat Alcaraz once. I want to do it again and again. These top guys, they think differently. They're like, I know I'm good now, but I want to be better. Even Djokovic, the reason he's still going, the reason Djokovic is still going, I think, is because he thinks of himself as a player who should have 30 majors. Like, he wants to keep going up and up. He wants to do things people have never done before. It's this kind of incredible self-belief that is often panned on social media when people hype themselves up. But really, that's a belief you need to have if you want a chance against Djokovic, if you want a chance to win these tournaments. And Sinner knows that it's in the journey. Alcaraz has his own journey. He's going to have his own obstacles as well. He started out super young, as did Sinner, by the way, got to a Roland Garros quarterfinal as a teenager. But I think that is that's a player that knows that it's a journey, knows to constantly improve, and that he has ways to grow. But from the start, he's just been tapering himself to be able to get to that level. And you've seen improvements on the serve, you've seen improvements in his clutchness, and you just see improvements in his variety as well. Like I said, coming to net a lot against Alcaraz, against Medvedev. And I think he's not as flashy as Alcaraz, but he is so talented that it's actually ridiculous. And I think that everybody who really understands tennis and understands the highest level of the sport knows that he's been growing and growing, and his growth is not done yet. So he's a player that has the potential to win majors. We'll see if he does that, but this was a big step in the right direction.
For sure. And I think if it wasn't for Alcaraz, I think maybe people's expectations would be a little bit more in line. Alcaraz winning a major or two majors at the age that he's at, I think people have put Sinner and Alcaraz in the same bucket and think that Sinner's underperforming because he's not got a slam and Alcaraz has two. But I think, people need to understand that the older players are still dominant in the men's game, and Alcaraz is an exception, not the rule. Whereas on the women's side, we see consistently young players in their teenage years being able to win Grand Slam titles, and that's happened for decades. But with the men's game, that's slowly been changing because of the dominance of the old guard and the fact that there are players in the mix in their 27s, 28s who are really freaking hard to beat. And so, the Alcaraz is the exception, not the rule, and Sinner is very much on a good trajectory and good path at his age to, be on track to go on and win a couple slams, and he certainly has the skill set to do so. So let's see if he cracks the code in 2024.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd like to also add on to that fact is that Sinner and Alcaraz could use each other as rivals to really pump themselves up going for the future, to really improve themselves the way that Federer, Nadal, Djokovic constantly needed a rival to really do that. I think even if Sinner doesn't get to the level that Alcaraz does get to, which I do predict is going to be the case, although we'll see, I think that still, Sinner has proved that he's a really tough matchup for Alcaraz, that he can push him back behind the court. And that, I think, is something that he will really, that Alcaraz is actually going to come to really cherish in the end, is that Sinner is really going to have to test him to really bring out his best tennis and constantly be on the ball, constantly be on the mark, and to really, although he might be extremely annoyed if probably, as they will play many major finals, if Sinner starts beating him in those finals, which could be another factor to why maybe Sinner is going to win a lot of majors, is if Alcaraz is really that good of a matchup for Sinner, although I expect it's going to even itself out pretty, how would you say, to a point where I think tennis fans are going to be pretty satisfied, actually. But I think that is a rivalry that is going to really help each other improve. And yeah, Sinner doesn't have to be Alcaraz. He has to beat Alcaraz. He doesn't have to be Alcaraz. And Sinner is going to want to really not pay attention to all of the kind of expectations and just do his own thing. That's what he's been able to do so far. And that's what I think he's going to continue to do, because he does seem to be tapering himself in a really kind of smart way.
Yeah, well said. I agree.
Okay, and then Beijing, great win for Jannik. Let's see how he does in Shanghai. In Shanghai, it's looking Medvedev lost, Zverev is out, Sinner and Alcaraz are the big favorites to reach the final, and I think that That's what everybody expects, but there's a lot of players in the tournament that are playing really, really well. But like I said, Zverev lost to Safulin pretty comfortably, actually. Safulin is kind of underrated. He's playing a really good ball, hit it, really great backhand, which I think is why he did so well against Zverev, really strong backhand. So Zverev is not going to just beat him on the backhand to backhand that easily, and really aggressive game that really helped him out. I mean, I saw Safulin for the first time at the ATP, I believe ATP Cup last year, and he was playing really well. So I'm glad to see him pull it off. Also, Wimbledon quarterfinals reached the final a couple weeks ago where he actually lost to Zverev. So it was a good improvement. I believe he lost to Zverev in that final, but reached the final a couple weeks ago. And yeah, that's good to see. And then also Medvedev as well lost to Sebastian Korda yesterday in a rematch of the Australian Open. Do you think Korda is a bad matchup for Medvedev? What do you think about that one there?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, look, I don't think Medvedev started out the year particularly strong, but he would admit to that too. His rankings fell and the performances were subpar at the beginning of this year until he was kind of able to get on a run after the Australian Open and win a couple of those hardcourt titles. So I'm not sure that Australian Open match is too much to go off of, because also the way Korda was playing at the AO was really strong. And he really challenged Djokovic in some of those warm-up tournaments, and Djokovic gave him so many compliments as to, his game and what he possesses. And then unfortunately Korda fell off and, got injured in that Australian Open tournament, and then has had a kind of stop-start season since then. But I think we all know, if you've seen Korda play, he has one of the most complete tennis games you can have in terms of the skill set that he possesses and his ability to make tennis look really easy. And, I think at this time of year, you start to see some of these upsets happen. Zverev, kind of similar thing, like tired legs. It's a long season. Asian swing is a lot of travel. You have Medvedev coming off the back of a final at the Australian Open, a final in Beijing, a lot of travel. And you have Zverev, who's just been trying to get as many points as he possibly can, entering any tournament he can. Post the US Open to try to qualify for ATP finals. So I do think sometimes this time of year, it's not a completely clean slate in terms of these types of matchups. But I do also think that Korda, he served insanely well. He got, I think, over 70% of his second serve points won, which is a huge number for him, and his placement was just really strong. And he just seemed to have a little bit more gas in the tank, kind of willingness to hang in there in the rallies and, and keep going. So I wouldn't read too much into the kind of head-to-head. I think it's 2-1 now in that head-to-head. It would be interesting to see if they did play each other again in a 5-setter, who would come out on top of that. But perhaps Korda has some more of that kind of variety in his skill set that could upset Medvedev. He's usually somebody that uses his variety and kind of that ability to challenge players. So in that sense, it's a unique matchup, but I wouldn't read too much into it at this point of the season.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, with especially with only 3 matches played, I understand that for sure. I think that it was a good win for Sebi, though. I mean, Sebi reached the semifinals of Shanghai. He reached the final of the tournament that he played last week. I think that that is that's a player that was doing really well up until he got injured around the clay swing, and that he's one of the cleanest ball strikers on the tour. I think it kind of makes sense that he does well against Medvedev, but I think that, until they play more times, it's probably not something to look too much into. But I do think that his kind of, consistently just aggressive, well-placed balls from back to court, strong backhand, just solid all around. I mean, I think he actually has a similar game to Medvedev in some ways, but probably a little bit more aggressive. But I think that it's a good. I think we're going to get some good matches from there, especially as Medvedev looks for answers. That was a
matchup, or a really interesting one is the Alcaraz Evans matchup. We've had 2 matches now between them that have just been like some of the best tennis of the season. I don't know what it is about those 2, but holy moly, they played last night in Shanghai, and it was just a fantastic match. I mean, it was just full of highlight reels, and I feel for Dan because man, he tries so hard, but Alcaraz is obviously tough to beat. But something about that matchup seems to be a little bit of fireworks for Alcaraz. What do you think?
Yeah. I'm just sad that it happened at 3 a.m. here in the U.S. I can't watch it. It's like it's so late in the States because it's 12 hours ahead in China. I'm just like, I don't know, but it was amazing. I watched the highlights of it. It was some of the most like quirky, crazy rallies. Alcaraz hitting crazy shots out of nowhere. Evans just smiling, laughing. He's like, I've got no chance, but I'm playing top 10 level. And it's like, what can you do? It's like I don't know. It's like the Verdasco versus Nadal 2009 Australian Open. It's like one guy is like kind of trying to do an upset, like way below in the rankings, like playing out of his mind, but he's coming against a guy who just like can't lose. And it's like, well, what am I supposed to be doing out here tracking down every ball? And it's like, it's crazy. I don't know what it is about that matchup. I think Evans is actually underrated and being fun to watch. His entertainment value is, I think, really, really high, actually. I really like his kind of fearlessness on the court, too. I love his in-your-face personality that he brings, just yelling, come on, all over the place. And it's like, it's kind of fun to watch. So I think it's fun, and I want to see more of that matchup because at the U.S. Open, I locked it in my head. I was like, wow, that was something. And then yesterday it happened, and well, so I hope we got more of those because both those guys are flashy players.
For sure, yeah, totally agree. And then we also had kind of two bigger upsets last night. The first one being Taylor Fritz losing out to Diego Schwartzman, who currently is ranked outside of the top 100. I mean, Schwartzman is a former top 10 player. For the life of me, cannot answer the question of what on earth happened to him over the last 18 months, 12 months. But I mean, the drop off in performance has just been like, I'm not even sure what to compare it to because it's been so sudden, but huge win for him last night and a very disappointing night for Fritz, who's doing everything he can to try to qualify for the ATP finals. He's now going to have to try to defend his title in Tokyo to kind of get those points back. So he'll be upset with having let that one go because that went tight in 3 sets, and he needed that win. Both of them.
Yeah, that's fair. I think Schwartzman needed it more, though. I mean, his season, he's been losing to so many guys in close battles, top guys. And I thought last week he played a match that was really good against Zverev. And I think that I was quite pleased to see that Schwartzman played such a high level against Fritz. I actually got to catch some of it because I got to catch some of that match. And it was really impressive ball striking from Schwartzman. And I think that, Fritz disappointing. I mean, he won Atlanta. That was kind of the one kind of tournament that he had where it was not where it looked like Fritz was back to his usual kind of level, even though he didn't have to play against a lot of top players there, but still very impressive to get the title. But other than that, since I think it was Monte Carlo reached the semifinals, lost to Rublev in 3 sets, I think that he really hasn't been on the ball. He started the season out great. Well, outside the Australian Open, I guess, but for the most part, he was playing really high level, and then he kind of just dropped off. And I think that is that's something that Fritz is going to be looking to need to improve. I guess the indoor courts, he usually does pretty well on fast courts, so hopefully he finds it then. I think he reached the semifinals, the ATP finals last year, lost to Djokovic in the semis. So I'm hoping that is a place where Fritz kind of regroups. But I think I would just say about that, I was happy to see Diego get the win because he played incredible. He kept losing these close matches. And even as a big Fritz fan, I was it was good as a tennis fan to see Schwartzman back in the mix because I love the comments of people saying stuff. If Schwartzman was like half a foot taller, he'd be like one of the greatest of all time because he's one of the most talented players ever. Just the way he hits the shots is crazy. And I think that, the angles he gets on his shots, how quick he is, it's kind of ridiculous. So I'm happy to see Schwartzman get a win whenever he gets one. That was a big one yesterday, 7-5 in the 3rd set to take out top 10 player. First time since Barcelona last year beats a top 10.
Yeah. And then another top 10 player falling, Tsitsipas losing to Humbert, who's having a really strong comeback season after kind of falling off towards the end of last year. And he has interesting stats now, 50% win rate versus top 10 opponents, a higher win rate than opponents ranked less than him. strange. And Tsitsipas just seems to struggle against that kind of lefty type of player. We've seen that a few times this season. But yeah, Tsitsipas hasn't made it out of a third round or past the third round of a tournament since August. And that must be concerning for him. He's obviously had the coaching change. He fired Philippoussis. His dad's like back in charge. I watched an interview with him kind of being like, yeah, my dad's always going to be the guy. Like, I wanted to try working with somebody else. I mean, it's been on again, off again this year. I mean, surely the way he's behaved has also kind of probably put off some coaches wanting to even join his team with the dynamic that he has going on, to be honest. But he's really, not had the season he would have wanted. And to be honest, I think he's lost some of his fear factor since the Australian Open. I don't think people see his name in the drawer and feel as concerned. And he's going to need to make some technical adjustments and some mental adjustments in order to have a better year next year. And I'm not sure what to make of it. What do you think he needs to do differently towards the end of this year to kind of finish things off on a better note?
Yeah, well, the first thing I would say is it's incredibly disappointing because he started out the season playing some of the best tennis. I'm just going to say he played some of the best tennis on a hard court I've ever seen him play at the Australian Open, reached the final there. He was hitting the forehand massive, coming to net super aggressively. He's not really playing aggressively at all at the moment. He's playing a lot of slices, playing very kind of not getting the depth on his shots. I mean, I felt like he played a little bit better against Jari, who tends to have a good matchup against him, but he was playing Kumbert. He was playing Kumbert, but it was but it's still Kumbert is in really good form. So I think that Kumbert played really well, good aggressive tennis to get it done. I think that is I was excited about the fact that he even looked like he deserved to be in the top 20 playing against Kumbert. Some of the points that I saw in that match, I feel like recently he's losing to players outside of the top 40, top 50. He lost to Gasquet in a grass court event to start off the grass swing. He's been losing to weird players all over the place. So it's been a weird run for Tsitsipas. What he needs to improve is he needs to improve this coaching situation somehow or another because it's just not working. He needs to switch up his box to have. Obviously he has that inclination to want to do that, to move his dad out of the position that he was in and then get Philippoussis in. So I think that's something, but I think he needs to move his coaching situation about, and he needs to do what he was doing at the start of the year to play more aggressively. That's kind of what I think about it. Also just be more effective on a serve to get more free points on serve, because even that I think is less than it was. And that's kind of what I see. He needs to get that aggressive game back, and I think he needs to move his box around because he's had the same box for a while.
Yeah, I think so. And to me, I watched him lose to Dominic Stricker in person at the US Open, and I felt watching him that his backhand is just too inconsistent. It's like you give him one really hard ball and one floater, and and all of a sudden he'll just shank the floater out of nowhere. And it's just like it's strange because his forehand is most certainly his weapon, and his backhand is just really broken down a lot. And now that that's a target that people kind of have, they rush him on that side, and it's not like when he misses, it's a few inches or a few centimeters here and there. It's like horrible misses, shanks way out. And you just sort of think like, why are you going for that shot? Like, what is up with your timing? It's like he's not fully focused in the middle of a point. I don't know, but there's so many different things kind of going on. And for how good of an athlete he is, like physically, for him to be losing these types of battles when he has the skill set, and we've seen him play at a much different level. I mean, it has to come down, as you say, to the coaching box and his kind of mental situation that he's got going on. I don't like blaming things on the whole Tsitsidosa situation. I don't think that being in a relationship changes your skill set on the court. And, perhaps there's a lack of concentration at times, but these people are professionals. They turn up, they practice. He's doing all of the right things, I'm sure, that he needs to do off of the court. It's not like because he's dating someone that, all of a sudden his routine completely changes, unless other people know things we don't know. But, I would less so focus on that and more so focus on the strange treatment of the Philippoussis situation, the strange relationship he has with his dad and how his dad behaves in the box, and this kind of strange breakdown in his shots, and particularly that backhand side. So really curious to see how that is going to unravel. He hasn't yet qualified for the ATP finals. He's obviously in the mix too. But I mean, he's going to need a good, run at one of these next two tournaments, or at least not have an early exit, because he's in a position where he's vulnerable and could get caught and miss out on that qualification. So you never know.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, I mean, well said on everything. I think I don't have much more to add there. I just think that coaching situation is really kind of tedious and strange. I hope that gets figured out. But okay, that's kind of the Shanghai tournament. We'll have kind of the results for you and how the draw expands later on next week when we get back around to it. But for now, let's quickly get to the power ranking section, where we talk about the players who we think are at the top of their game at the moment. This is the power ranking section. All right, now the power ranking section of the podcast, where we go over the players who we think are doing kind of the best at the moment. So for me, I think Beijing on the men's side, starting with the men's side first, Beijing had to play a big role on it. Sinner moves ahead of Alcaraz and Medvedev for me. And also for you as well. I see Sinner at number one. Do you want to talk about why Sinner moved so high? I guess it's obvious because of the Beijing win, but.
Yeah. So I guess for me, I was thinking about power rankings in terms of, who's most likely to get a result this week, next week, the week after. Djokovic isn't going to play a tournament until the Paris Masters. At least that's what we've been told right now. And he hasn't been playing since the US Open. And obviously he's a name we expect to win, but he's not playing next week. So that's why he's not in my power rankings, because I wanted to add some new names to the list to talk about. Which is why for me, Sinner tops the chart, best performer over the last 10 days or so. And, I think that win over Alcaraz and win over Medvedev, in terms of, streak or who's hot right now, to me, Sinner owns that spot. But obviously, still the Alcaraz, Medvedev names there in the mix in terms of, who's coming up. And of course, if Djokovic were to be playing, he would slot in around there too. But wanted to also kind of give a nod to some folks who I wanted to add to the list at the bottom, but it looks like we're pretty similar in terms of the meat in the middle, with Rublev and Zverev kind of swapping things around with each other depending on the tournament and that week. But those two seem to kind of really be at that consistent number 5, number 6, number 7 spot, and they're kind of rotating around within that zone. So I think, testament to that consistency this season, and Zverev really stepping it up in the second half of the season on his kind of comeback year. But looks like we kind of have some differences from the 6th spot onwards. I see you don't have Paul in your list. You don't have Fritz in your list. Talk to me.
Yeah. I almost want to include Paul in there. He was so close to my number 10. I felt like I've been snubbing Shelton, so I put him in. But kind of my reason for Paul is because he lost his 2 matches at Davis Cup. He hasn't been performing that great since the US Open. He's done well in a couple matches this week. Lost pretty early in Beijing as well. So that's kind of why I didn't include Paul in there. And I should have had Fritz in there. I feel bad, but it's the Schwartzman loss that kind of made me kind of bring him out. Or put him out of the list. Yeah. I
put Paul in there because he has made the round of 16 in every hard court Masters this year, round of 16 or better. And I think he's just outside the top 10, and he's a name that has just been so consistent and impressive on the hard courts this year. And I wanted to give a nod to that because he's made so many improvements in his game. And, he's honestly an underrated mover in my opinion too. So would love to see him have a good little run here, a good little finish to the season. I mean, he's also still in contention for qualification if he was to pick up the title. So, you know, yes, he's kind of cooled off a little bit since the US Open, but I also just think it's sometimes that post Grand Slam slump and Laver Cup matches. I can't factor in too highly, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's fair. I think Paul's been actually top 5 win percentage on hard courts for the entire season, which is really crazy. And he has the indoors coming up, which he's going to really enjoy. And then, I think we had similar. I think we have Dimitrov in there. We have Shelton. You have Shelton at 8. I have Shelton at 10. It's understandable. Shelton had a great run in New York, obviously. And Sebastian Korda doing well. We almost have Korda and Shelton kind of switched around. And then going into the women's side, the way I do the power rankings is I kind of I have Djokovic at the top just because my kind of way of doing the power rankings is if they've at least played a tournament within the last month or so, and they've played a tournament, and I kind of give them the benefit of the doubt if it is somebody performing as consistently as Novak, but it's just a different way of doing the kind of power ranking structure. And I still have Coco at the number 1 spot, but obviously Ika getting the Beijing title, she moved up a lot on both of our kind of rankings lists, which was cool to see. Sabalenka drops down. You have Sabalenka in front of Coco, which I kind of think is interesting. Walk me through that.
Yeah. I mean, I think Coco has had a great 16-match win streak, but I think Sabalenka's had a fantastic year. You know, they both have a Grand Slam each, but Sabalenka made the semifinals or better of each of the Grand Slams. Super impressive. And I think that her consistency over this season, to me, has earned her the slight nod over Coco, even if Coco at this current moment in time or day might have put together a couple more wins than Sabalenka under the belt. But Sabalenka played a really well-performing Rybakina. Coco had to play a really well-performing Swiatek. They both kind of fall at similar hurdles. And so there's really not much between them. And we haven't seen them play since the US Open either. So to me, as well, with Sabalenka having the number 1 spot, she's earned that over the years. So that's why I gave her the slight nod over Goff.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. I think a lot of people are disappointed by Goff losing to Swiatek as well in the semis, but I just had to put keep Goff at my number 1 just because of that 16-match win streak. So that's just kind of the difference there. And then moving on as well, Rybakina bumped up from to our number 4 spot for the both of us, and then also Pegula at 5, Sakkari at 6, and then I think we have the exact same play. Or no, you have Garcia at 9, and I'm trying to figure out what the difference is for that.
In my list at the moment, again, kind of similar to this like Djokovic situation. Mukova and Vondrousova fell out on my list just because they haven't been playing the last couple of tournaments. Haven't seen them around. They've made qualification in there. Resting. I know that Vondrousova, even post US Open, was struggling with some injuries, so kind of hard to know, what her level is right now going into the WTA finals. And Kudermetova, I wanted to, add her into my list because I think she's had a really strong past couple of weeks. Obviously got the title last week, lost to Coco this week, but still had a decent run. And then I also wanted to give a nod to Garcia because, again, she, as we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, she's not had the best of years. She was having some rough things going on in her personal life. And so to have had a really good little run from, Guadalajara to Tokyo to here in Beijing, that she deserves a little bit of momentum and a slot inside the power rankings at the moment, just because, she really gave Swiatek a run for her money as well. And she's finishing off the season well, which she needed to. And she's knocking on the door of top 10 again. And impressed by some of her performances lately.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. yeah, once again, just the difference of Muchova just kind of not really performing much recently, but Garcia with a few good runs. But yeah, I kind of wish I could have given Garcia a top 10 out as well, because she is playing much better than she did at the start of the season. She is picking up some momentum to really playing her best game again. I think a lot of it was mental, to be honest. I think that side is really improving. And Garcia is also in a tournament coming next week, so we can go now to the kind of upcoming kind of section for the podcast.
For sure.
So let's see here for the upcoming section. We've got a couple tournaments, a couple 500s. We have the WTA in Zhangzhou. We've got Maria Sakkari, the Guadalajara champion. We've got Ons Jabeur. We got Krejcikova, we've got Kasatkina, Garcia, Kudermetova. Those are the top seeds playing, but that's a stacked 500. Not ATP 500, not Beijing on the men's side stacked, but it's pretty stacked. And only Rybakina was slated to play the tournament, but then she had to withdraw. And then it should be an exciting tournament to see where Ons is at, to see how Sakkari and Garcia are progressing, because they're running on really great momentum. And there's some good matchups already kind of happening in that tournament. Zhang and Sakkari are supposed to play next. Zhang, a very talented and exciting, aggressive style player who's dangerous for anybody on the tour, and that's going to be interesting. Yeah. Also, Paulini, Garcia, they had a good match on the indoors, so that should be fun. And then also the Japan tournament, on the men's side, we have a lot of players playing. Fritz, Ruud, and Zverev are the top seeds in the tournament. Fritz defending the title, and then also players like De Minaur, players like Paul. And the race to Turin is still very much on. So that's going to be interesting. I think the last time we did the podcast, I think we talked about the race and the players doing who we think is going to fill out the spot. So what do you think about that?
Interesting.
Who's going to.
Yeah, interesting part of the schedule. Obviously, the WTA and ATP varied slightly, with the WTA holding Guadalajara, which is a Masters tournament, so soon after the US Open, whereas the ATP is having their Masters now and at the end of this, or towards the end of this month, in Paris. So, this is the last 500 of the season for the WTA players. As we mentioned earlier, qualification for WTA finals is already wrapped up. So, after this, there's only kind of 250 tournaments available, which top-seeded players can only play a handful of per season anyway on the WTA side. So for a lot of folks like a Sakkari or a Krejcikova, Kasatkina, Garcia, those names who didn't make the cut for the WTA finals, this is kind of their last opportunity to battle it out for those final kind of top spots to round off their ranking for the end of this year. And all of them will want to finish the year on a good note. There are a couple other 250 tournaments, as I mentioned, that are going on at the moment as well in Hong Kong, and there will be one in Tunisia as well, and a couple others. But kind of last opportunity for some of those bigger names to finish off their season on a good note. Whereas, kind of as I said, the ATP has a few more. This is also their last 500, but they've got that Masters coming up, and there are a couple of other 250s that are starting next week. I think Holger Rune is playing in one of his home tournaments in Europe. So a couple different names on that entry list as well. But this is a strong ATP 500 tournament. And as you said, the qualifying for the finals is very much still in contention with Rublev, Tsitsipas, Zverev, Rune, Fritz, Ruud, Paul, all names that could still qualify, which is why this 500 and the next Masters tournament for them is going to be huge. So a lot to kind of pay attention to actually still on the ATP side over the next couple of weeks. De Minaur is still in the race. So, 4 spots still available, and it's all to play for.
Yeah, I think so. And then, like you said, the 2 Masters, but then also tournaments like Basel, tournaments like Tokyo. And I think that's going to be really interesting. And a lot of spots still open. I think potentially Rune's spot is very open in the race right now to be taken up. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see who steps up. Like Paul and De Minaur, who will be playing the Japan tournament, they're really good on fast indoor courts. So that there are 2 players that could step up. So it's gonna be really interesting to see. I will also mention that I do think that the WTA schedule, where you have this kind of schedule kind of ending in the start of October, and then the WTA finals, like it's like, well, first of all, like you said, Guadalajara and U.S. Open, it's all so back to back, and it's like there needs to be some kind of revamp. It's ridiculous. It needs to.
It was bad for the fans, bad for the players, bad for the tournament. Who wants to get the best players competing there? And Guadalajara is a great tournament. They have fantastic fans. I, for the life of me, do not understand it. And what I also find super confusing, which I guess kind of bleeds into some of the culture question that I still can't figure out the answer to, is the WTA finals were scheduled to be in China earlier this year in May. WTA announced that they were returning to China for the WTA finals. And so at that point, you think, okay, like it makes sense why they have Guadalajara where it is, because they thought they were finishing off their year in Asia. And now the finals in Cancun, so they're going from, Mexico to Asia back to Mexico. And it makes no sense. And you can tell that there's just been, for whatever reason, so many challenges in that organization and that leadership, and trying to understand like what the schedule looks like. But this just can't be the case again next year, because we've had this now 2 years in a row, and it's super disappointing. And it's also just such a shame, for the players. Like if this was their last 500 tournament, like in my opinion, WTA finals should be next week. Let them be done. Yeah. Let them have a life, have some break, and then start the year strong. Like, why are we now dragging this out with a couple random 250s in between, and we're waiting till the end of October to get to WTA finals? I mean, it would have made way more sense if they had known that they weren't going to play the finals in China, that they had moved Guadalajara at least to at some point in October rather than straight after the US Open. I wish I could have been a fly on the wall and what those conversations were like, because my goodness, that schedule made absolutely no sense.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think the biggest thing, in my opinion, that needs to be changed in tennis is a way to look at tennis scheduling where it makes way more sense for the players. And I've said it before, if it makes more sense for the players, it makes more sense for the fans. I think that you need to have better sense scheduling. First of all, where it kind of makes sense for the surfaces across the board, because a lot of times you just have random clay tournaments kind of in the middle of hard, and you have a very kind of abbreviated grass swing, and then you have like clay tournaments back to back. You have like Madrid, Rome, and Roland Garros within like 5 weeks of each other, and then also just places, tournaments across the board, especially on the women's side, that have not easy solutions, but at least on paper, it seems like that you can figure out some solutions, make it at least miles better than it is at the moment. So there needs to be a way better revamp for the schedule, because we're like early October. WTA finals is in a month. First of all, the players are going to completely lose their momentum with how well they're playing at the moment going into the finals. And then physically as well. I mean, we talk about the sport playing at the highest level physically. I mean, they're going to be all out of sorts. Some people might not even play. And I saw the WTA Finals Stadium in China is barely even being built at this point. I don't know what's going on. It's like it's like nails and whatever. It doesn't make much sense, and the schedule needs a big revamp, I think, on the men's side as well, but especially like way more on the women's side. It's the top of the top of the leadership needs a change, and the scheduling in the way of how a season is set up, but also match times. There's a lot that can be said about tennis scheduling. And we're going to talk about it more. We're going to talk about it more for future podcasts as well.
For sure. We could spend a whole podcast about it. But the ATPs,
literally,
finishing out of the season, they had a little bit of a break post the US Open. A couple of the players played Davis Cup, a couple played Laver Cup. We had a little bit of a pause. And as you say, now players get to, somebody like a Djokovic, who's taken the month off. He's going to have Paris Masters to get himself into form before getting to the ATP finals. And as you say, we have a number of these top players now. I mean, who from the WTA, qualified list other than Jabeur is playing the 500 tournament? Who has momentum coming into the WTA finals? I mean, they're not allowed to play 250 events. So you want them to take the next 20 days off and then come and have a really high level like WTA final, and expect that, especially at the end of the season where everybody's tired. So you give them a little bit, it's like it's like teasing somebody with like, here, take a nap rather than a whole sleep, and make sure you play well. It makes no sense. So I'm really disappointed for them, because I think the WTA finals, deserves to be a pillar head of the season. And I think the ATP has done such a good job of making it that, when it was in London in the O2, it was a really sought after event. People really enjoyed. And now it's in Italy, and it's also a really strong event. And tennis fans are really aware of it. They have the stadium, they have the infrastructure. And as I said before, like, they had the contract, they had everything in place to play in China. And now with no information, it's like, oh, now it's in Cancun, and nobody understands why it's in Cancun, because there's no stadium even erected to play. So it's just like, I don't even know what to say. Yeah,
it's a setup for failure is what it is, and it needs to be revamped. There needs to be a revamp of the tennis scheduling for sure. That's at least my opinion of it. There needs to be a look at it, and it is difficult to set up a whole season, but people are putting forward solutions, and there needs to be a real look at those solutions, I think. So, but yeah, and then also something else that's been going on as well. Ons Jabeur and Venus are going to be playing doubles together. They received a wild card. Initially, Venus said that her last doubles match is going to be with Serena at last year's US Open, but I mean, that wasn't a real good way to go out in doubles, in my opinion. If she wants to play with Jabeur, I think that's great. Two of the best mentalities in the women's game, and I think that it's exciting to see that before Venus kind of hangs up her racket. That well, first of all, that Venus announces she's still going to be playing next year. I wouldn't be surprised if she announces a retirement next year's US Open or something, but before she hangs up the racket to play with Ons is really, really cool stuff to see from Venus.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, it's a 250 tournament. It's also Jabeur's home tournament in Tunisia, and we know that Jabeur is really committed to trying to grow the sport in the Middle East and Africa. And so she knows, the influence that a Venus Williams name has on the sport and the ability to grow the sport. And so to me, I look at this a little bit as an exhibition. I mean, Jabeur isn't a doubles player, and Venus is, older and towards the end of her career, and plays in these types of opportunities. She played in the exhibition with Monica Puig recently in South America for her retirement kind of exhibition match. So she's going to be, I think, next year floating around between little 250 tournaments and kind of these types of exhibition style things where she'll get a wild card here and there because of the influence she's had on the game and how much she's done for women's tennis and the sport and the legacy she's left behind. So I think that's really the intention behind this, is to give the fans something to be excited about, and Jabeur's way of, trying to get the biggest names attracted to the tournaments in her home country and in the Middle East to really try and help opportunities and prospects for players coming from that part of the world.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, if you saw Venus play at the U.S. Open, she was far from her best. So I think it's more about kind of the fun of the situation rather than kind of the actual trying to go all the way at the tournament. But I think all the same, it should be fun to watch Venus back at it one more time in the doubles sphere, especially with a player like Jabeur, which I kind of feel like it's a good match together. But that's exciting. And anyway, we talked a lot. We talked about Beijing, Shanghai. We're going to talk about Shanghai as it ends next week. But yeah, that was Tennis 360 with I've been Anthony Hirsch.
And I'm Eliza Wastcoat.
And thank you guys for watching. Make sure to join in for the next podcast as well. And see you guys next week. Don't forget to like the video and don't forget to sub to QualityShot Tennis. See you guys at the next one.
Bye, guys.